society has two major principles according to which society is organized. One is political system, and the other is the financial system. And the financial system is the equivalent of a nervous system, sending small subtle signals of how to allocate resources. And if we look around in the world, how the world operates, we have to say that the financial system doesn't achieve its objective. Resources are not efficiently allocated. We have market prices which do not reflect the cost of sustainability of maintaining a healthy environment. That's at the macro level.
As UTX, we oftentimes talk about technology being at the center of human progress. While this is true, there is another factor that we cannot forget about, namely how these fruits of technological progress are reaped and distributed. This is not done equally today.
Richard Olsen's mission is to work against inequality by providing access to financial markets to everyone. With his background as a PhD from law from the University of Zurich and over 25 years of professional experience as an FX dealer, a researcher, a high-frequency trading specialist, and a serial entrepreneur of financial marketplaces, he is more than well served to do so.
Known by many as the great-grandfather of the crypto sector, Richard is the founder and CEO of Lykke, a Swiss marketplace and pioneer provider of investment and trading infrastructure for blockchain assets. He previously founded Oanda, a forex and CFD trading platform and data service for traders. This was acquired by the large private equity firm CVC Capital Partners back in 2018. He has also co-authored the book Introduction to High-Frequency Finance.
Lykke is the Danish word for happiness. Join our talk with Richard to learn more about why finance can be a source of global happiness and how Richard and his companies are contributing for that to happen.
Hello guys, and welcome to this week's interview of the UTX podcast. We have a very interesting one today, interviewing the great grandfather of the crypto sector himself, Mr. Richard Olsen. Richard, it's wonderful to have you. How are you?
Great pleasure to be with you. Thanks for making an interview. Great fun.
Welcome to the UTX podcast. Maybe you have a quick introduction, Richard, about yourself. Our listeners and our viewers will have already had a quick introduction because we give one about each of our interview guests before the interview. But maybe it's also good to hear from yourself a quick introduction about yourself and maybe Lykke.
So I'm founder and CEO of Lykke. Lykke is a fintech blockchain company where the goal is to bring traditional financial markets to blockchain. We earn money by being market makers and building a set of complementary tools and services around it to make this whole work. My personal background, I kind of live in Switzerland, studied law, then economics, then worked in a bank, then did my first startup, which was called Olsen and Associates, where we built a real-time information system with real-time forecasts using tick-by-tick data. It was a big data project before the name existed. At the time before the internet, when one still had to get leased lines to install the user agents at banks, etc. Out of that, then we kind of launched Oanda, which was our internet offshoot. And we did it at the time when we were selling tick-by-tick data for $500,000 to the big banks. And we started to make available currency information for the everyday man on the internet. And this company then launched the first fully automated trading platform for foreign exchange trading. It was then a shooting star. And Lykke is now the next stage, is because I wanted to really kind of innovate financial markets. So that's my background.
Yeah, so that sounds really inspiring, and it shows that you have a lot of experience. And traditionally, when we talk about blockchain, there's some level of uh, kind of awareness that financial markets could be improved, or that they need a sort of update. And especially with your background of having spent this many years in that field, what was kind of your moment of epiphany, or your kind of awareness, and the problems that you see in the financial markets today, where you think that blockchain is really the solution, that you are inspired to dedicate your career to improving the market? So like, what was that moment, and what are the problems in your eyes?
So first of all, it's a long career in terms of making lots and lots of observations and a long, long learning curve. But it starts off when studying at Oxford. There, kind of it's kind of political economics says society has two major principles according to which society is organized. One is political system, and the other is the financial system. And the financial system is the equivalent of a nervous system, sending small subtle signals of how to allocate resources. And if we look around in the world, how the world operates, we have to say that the financial system doesn't achieve its objective. Resources are not efficiently allocated. We have market prices which do not reflect the cost of sustainability of maintaining a healthy environment. That's at the macro level. Then in my career, we have collected tick by tick data and have done bottom-up research of how financial markets operate. So in my career, I've done a lot of engineering to really go in detail and seeing how markets really operate. And as I went down this road, I made more and more discoveries of things which are completely out of whack. That is, we have theories which say, everything must be working well. But when you do the kind of X-ray microscopic research, you see, but this is not true. This doesn't work. This doesn't work. This is not true. And to give you a few very concrete examples, one is that when I now have the electric lamp on, the electricity company which supplies the electricity to my home bills me for every second that I use electricity. If I switch off the kind of light, I stop to pay for the electricity. In the banking industry, when I loan out money for 5 hours, the bank cannot charge me for 5 hours. They can only charge a recipient of a loan if the holder of the loan has the loan overnight. The same thing is in financial markets. If I buy an asset which bears a high rate of interest, but I buy the asset for 2 hours, I buy it now, sell it again on in 2 hours, I do not receive interest for the 2 hours. Now, very important, as we learned with the COVID, smallest details matter. And the same thing is with kind of an economic system and financial system. If small details are not carefully worked out, then the whole thing doesn't work, like your bicycle. So, or on your computer, a small bug can bring the whole program down. So the same thing is true in financial markets. Financial markets have at different levels technical deficiencies, which just make that the market doesn't achieve its right objectives. So I can explain more about that.
So as you said, the market does not achieve its objectives, and something is wrong with the mechanisms. And you say that the result of that is an unequal world and unequal access to those markets. How are you going to change that? Why is crypto and blockchain the way to go about this? Maybe we're jumping a little bit into the solution already. Maybe you can connect it again to the problem.
So first of all, I don't like to talk about the future, and I don't like to talk about everything that we can improve. Because then immediately everyone says, why? But you haven't yet done that. You haven't done that. And people don't understand that it's one thing to have an objective and it's another to execute. Execute is a world of small steps. You work hard, you make errors. And therefore, it's a bad thing if you kind of say everything which we can solve, because people are cynical, say, look, this you cannot do so. So if you let's cycle back to the time when you were a lot younger and you had a mobile from Nokia in your hand. Could you have imagined a smartphone at the time?
No.
Impossible.
Impossible, yeah.
So in the same spirit, we can do things which are today impossible to imagine. So in that sense, I don't like to talk about it, because people then ask me, why don't you have it? But let us now, in spite of this big, big qualification, say why we can do something, why this is such an awesome technology. And there I have to, again, before I explain what we can do, I have to say that I have a deep, deep respect for nature. I mean, technology is good, but the unbelievable subtlety of nature is mind-blowing. I mean, just think of a small child is born, egg, sperm, egg cell, and then suddenly there is a child, it grows, it is just a big miracle. But the same is true if you go out in the forest, if you see the flowers. I mean, just think how they grow, all the subtlety. And then you take out your biology book and see how it works. And then first you see a biology book, it's that thick, with lots of content, this is that. You say, okay. And what is at the core so important? At the core of nature is atoms, electric charges, and molecules, and they can move around, and it's incredibly active. And now, blockchain and tokenization gives one big advantage. Just now, at this day, as we speak, it's fashionable to NFTs, non-fungible tokens, piece of art, 69 million. But now, what you can do is, actually, you have one token for this art. But what I can do now, I can slice up this token into million pieces, and even more. And what I then can do, I can send you one fraction of this picture like that. So why is this so important? Is because tokenization allows splitting of micro tokens and then start to exchange them. And now we know that small incentives can trigger a response. So one thing, at least, Zurich was incredibly cleanly before. There was never any piece of paper on the road. But today, people throw it away, slice it. Think if you had an IoT, Internet of Things, you have a small vacuum cleaner that goes along and just collects micro pennies as it cleans up the paper. So with paying, like you have a vacuum cleaner, you have these lawnmowers in gardens, which now go along. But let's equip the lawnmower with a small wallet, which collects micro tickets, micro tokens, and all the PET bottles, all the kind of ice cream leaves had small kind of addresses, QR codes embedded. This internet lawnmower equivalent, which cleans the streets, would go along and would collect all PET bottles, all pieces of paper. So you can clean up a road perfectly. You just have a kind of automatic vacuum cleaner which goes along here, cleans it all day.
Yeah,
that's just one example.
Yeah, I like the analogy of using incentives, especially micro incentives, so to speak, to create an ecosystem where you have a complete symbiosis, much like in nature, where nothing is wasted, where every animal, every plant, every worm, every fungus has its function, and they all kind of live in a cycle and benefit each other. That you can achieve the same thing with all the technology that we have with vacuum cleaners, lawnmowers, cars, etc., by micro incentivizing it.
Exactly. So let's use modern technology to reinvent finance, reinvent incentives. I mean, look, if you look at the world at large today, think of how much has to be done. The whole healthcare problem, the kind of schooling, old age, kind of cleaning up the environment. My goodness. But we cannot do this from a helicopter point of view. We make a few big runs and then it's bottom up. There's so many gifted people around in the world, and they desperately look for jobs. So we have to make it easy for them to, wherever you are, you find a niche and you get to work. But we have to create and do things that work is easy. And today, this is literally not the case. So radical digitization allows us to get rid of this old-fashioned friction, which kind of bugs us at every place. When you today set up a company, think of the amount of paperwork you have to do. That can be just radically removed.
Is this why you're known as the great grandfather of crypto? Because you're pushing it to a more, or you're pushing it at a scale that is not very common, right? At a scale that goes from micro to macro all the way to really push the benefits across all walks and all aspects of society.
Yes, I'm definitely more radical than many other people. I would say I'm not radical enough, but.
Would you say that, you're definitely applying intuition here and examples and imagination. Wouldn't you say it would be possible for someone that would not have the wealth of experiences in the background that you have with, it's incredible if you look at your background, all the things you did in high frequency trading, in founding Oanda, as an FX and CFD trading platform, and also with your law background. But you're really trying to think on first principles, thinking from your feet. Do you think this is something that distinguishes an entrepreneur, that he tries to really get bogged down in the details, but then also get back to the simple things, to really see through the things, see where the actual problem is, see how everything fits together?
First of all, I'm in awe of anyone who succeeds in building the smallest business. If you have a hamburger joint and someone is able to pay his bills, get it satisfied, I am deeply baffled, because it's so difficult just to provide a reliable quality service in any domains. So that's point one. And secondly, I truly think building a company is difficult, and in this environment especially so. So, there's so many different approaches, and I'm definitely far from a perfect founder or CEO. I have so many mistakes, which I could tell you of. So what is definitely, why I'm different from a normal founder, or quite normal traditional founder or CEO, that I would never do it just for business point of view. I am motivated because I see a deeper reason for doing it. Otherwise, I wouldn't. I mean, I would be in arts. I would write literature, culture. I mean, I would not be interested at all. I'm doing it because I think, you know, a lot of my friends went into biology or kind of environmental services or arts. But I think we have to look at finance in the same, you know, kind of with the same interest as you do core science. And it has been, for me, very painful to see that a lot of people in economics, finance, go in just to earn money. But naturally, earning money is important because it's a resource. And if you don't earn money, you cannot invest. But it shouldn't be the end goal. I mean, money just to be Dagobert Duck and just a kind of pile up money is no fun.
Absolutely. And this is somewhat of the perfect bridge towards your company, because what we would like to ask you, and we know the answer, but obviously the audience should also know, what does Lykke mean, and how does this connect to what you're doing with Lykke? To maybe have an introduction into.
So first of all, it's my grandmother's surname. My father said, you know, that has always brought us luck. That's point 2. And third, it means happiness and luck. So I think it's a, you know, somehow a nice kind of meaning to it. And that's the reason why we have it.
So how do you implement that kind of happiness, luck, and heritage into what you're doing, into the mission of reinventing or upgrading the world of finance?
Now, you know, in my inner ear, I hear all the complaints which I hear. So I hear everyone say, Richard, you didn't. So that's on the one hand. I think the first most important thing is I try to be truthful to myself. I just try to be sincere myself. And to do things, obviously always reflect, but at this end of the day, try to do what I think is the most appropriate at this very moment. That's point 1. The second is try to build something which is holistic. That is, I'm trying, however imperfect, at all levels to try to do it in the same spirit, be it if I think, you know, kind of, if I think about the company, the business plan, I'm inspired by my most abstract theories. So it is not that I just have here a kind of strategic execution plan, and in this other box, I have how I treat employees. I try to do everything in a consistent, even though it is imperfect way.
Can you go a little bit further into that? What do you mean by the consistency? Maybe also how you want to the consistency, how you want to bring Lykke's mission to life? Because as you said, it's a tough path, and there's a lot of roadblocks on the way.
So first of all, I mean, kind of, and maybe this makes sometimes working with me difficult, is I think through problems at many different levels at the same time, and try to see if my answers, which I come up for one problem, actually is in line with the strategy, is in line with that, is in line on personal level. So that's point 1. The second is that Lykke is different to a normal startup, because in startup lesson number 1 is please focus on one thing. You know, take one niche, just do this one niche. The problem is if you do that alone, then you cannot kick off with something which I think is very important in this whole thing, is that we need to create something of a small ecosystem. We need things, properties which complement each other. Like if you think of very successful companies like the Amazon the Googles of the world, is they do different things which complement each other. And this has been the biggest challenge for me at Lykke, is that to execute my plan, I needed different pieces in place. And now at last we're having that. So one very important piece is to be able to do market making. Because the future is about an infinite number of tokens. And one thing which they have in common is that tokens only make sense if I can sell a token and I can do so at a narrow spread, that it's cost efficient to sell and to buy. But that requires a market maker. So at Lykke, at the center of Lykke, is market making. Second, what we need is an exchange. So we have first a crypto exchange, and in future we need an OTF, a securities exchange for security tokens. And third is we need an organization which can help incumbents and businesses to kind of use some of our software solutions to expand our own ecosystem. So these were the 3 properties, or 4 properties, depending how you look, which we needed to kind of make the whole thing work. And obviously that was very challenging.
And additionally to those 3, you also issued your own token, the LKK token, the Lykke token. How did you come up with those 3 different, let's say, focuses? Which was first, and when did you realize that you sort of needed to apply not the classic startup approach, we focus on one thing, but we know we need to sort of build an ecosystem because we're really starting something radical new from scratch here?
I mean, first of all, at Oanda, in beginning 2012, it took me very long to understand what Bitcoin was about. Because first, I didn't understand the spiel. Bitcoin, one currency should conquer the world, and it didn't make sense to me. And then in 2011, I said, well, oh my goodness, I could use the infrastructure of Bitcoin, that is blockchain, to tokenize shares and use this as the new back office. So beginning in 2012, I tried to convince the board of Oanda to embrace that. But I didn't have a chance. So I left and said, look, let's start from scratch. But I didn't want to make the mistake of starting too early. So when I was, I then pitched the idea to UBS, they said yes, but, kind of didn't want to do it at my terms. And then finally, I still remember, I think in the winter of 2015, at the gallery opening, people came up to me and say, you have to buy Bitcoin, you have to buy Bitcoin. So I thought this was the right time. And then I started the new startup mid-2015. And now again, when starting the startup, I was completely wrong in my expectation. So first, it was clear to me, I wanted to build a crypto exchange as a first deliverable, but wanted to do the crypto exchange that it has 0 fees, because I wanted to create a really efficient marketplace. And then earn my money from market making. So, have a 0 fee exchange, and we earn money from market making. And third, I thought, very soon the regulator will say it's illegal to trade cryptos like that. All this has to be regulated. And then I thought, to make sure that we do the right thing, let's try to get regulated fast, because I thought the regulator would want to regulate this whole space very fast, because first, they want to get everything under their control. That's point 1. And second, that they would see blockchain and tokenization as an opportunity to repair the financial system and rectify the deficiencies. But now, as we have seen, something else happened. Cryptos have been exploding, albeit a kind of long interlude, but the people who have just focused on cryptos have done very well. And the regulator has kind of, as opposed to processing requests for being regulated fast, said, Richard, we don't understand it. We have to think. Let's think even more. So, that's the history. So.
Now, as you talk about the regulator, that's also an interesting question to us, because to us as outsiders, Switzerland was or has been a pioneer in the crypto space and has been moving it forward quite quickly. And you obviously have a lot of personal experiences working with FINMA and regulators in general in Switzerland to drive this space forward. Do you think we are sort of at the tipping point where, banks and incumbents are joining in and finally seeing that this is something that is here to stay? Do you think there will be something like a big boost coming, or will it continue to be sort of a long stretch, and it will take a couple more years until we get to something like a digital exchange or something that has legal?
So it's fascinating. So up to end of last year, up to end of 20, anyone whom you would have asked would say, look, Richard, it will take several years. Now, today, things are changing rapidly. The amount of money which is flowing in at this space is increasing week by week. Mm-hmm. But now, and this kind of sea change is bigger than what we ever have seen during the internet bubble. But still, we are at such an early stage that we'll see in the coming months a rapid acceleration. But having said that, there'll be some strong counter trends and cross currents, because central banks and regulators have not yet understood that to what extent this new technology can resolve the Achilles heel and shortcomings of the existing financial system. So you have first, on the one hand, I think the central bankers and regulators cannot really grasp the gravity of the situation. They are so kind of fighting everyday challenges that they cannot take a bird's eye view and see how serious the state is. Mm-hmm. And secondly, they lack the imagination and hands-on experience of what would be possible.
So you're saying it takes, so you're saying that you can't expect like regulators and central banks to kind of accept it and make the mainstream, or they can make the crypto more mainstream. So it has to come from private companies that push for it and make use public awareness, etc., to push these regulators and institutions to realize the opportunity that is crypto.
I think I'm not really kind of harsh on people. So first, it's very abstract to imagine. And we human beings have very big difficulties in understanding and anticipating the abstract. Just as before, as we were saying, it was impossible to visualize a smartphone. It's only by using the smartphone that we understand what we can do. The same thing with this new technology. People will only understand the scope and power when it's here.
Okay. So you mentioned that regulators are kind of not adapting fast enough, or they're not helping in making this mainstream. Do you see any other challenges, any other areas that say you wish you could change that by tomorrow morning? Are there any other institutions or bodies, etc., that you see that would help if they also accepted it and pushed for it, so that we could finally have this?
But that sounds so negative. I'm just baffled why people don't embrace more radical ideas. Because, it's clear that the challenges which we today have are so enormous that if we take the traditional approaches, it just doesn't work. Like, one thing which literally pains me every day is, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had, just like in the old Egypt, where there was one beautiful library with all the books? Shouldn't we create on the internet, resuscitate the Alexandria library? And every book written on this world should be freely accessible for anyone to read, with every research article. Wouldn't that be marvelous?
Yeah, that would be kind of like a Rosetta Stone, or kind of a checkpoint for humanity, and a continuous update of knowledge.
And like that, I mean, just if you think of, I mean, the world with all the kind of hardship of people, refugees around the world, I mean, kind of warfare. If you educate, if people have access to information, can read poetry, then, you know, kind of, this is shared. Information is absorbed. People can then do marvelous things. Like, I mean, and in that spirit, isn't it strange that Wikipedia hasn't received the Nobel Prize of Peace?
Exactly.
Wikipedia has done more for peace than any other organization these days. But in the same spirit, if we had a kind of Alexandria library, think of what it could contribute to peace, but it would also would contribute to build fabulous technology. Because now, if I access a research article, I have to pay $37. And if I'm too stingy to pay $37, you know, think of a guy who earns $100 in a developing country in a research lab. He will never buy this research article. So that's just one example. But another thing, for example, coming back to the first project which I built, is it was building a real-time weather forecasting service for the economy. That was the plan. And if you had told me, you know, I'm so old, in 85 or 86, that I'd grow as old to the year 2021, and that would not exist in the world, I would never believe it. But this is reality. We don't have a real-time forecasting model of the world collecting all digital data and providing us the equivalent of weather forecasts. Now, everyone tells me, Richard, this is difficult. But think of how much talent we have in the world, and think of the cost of an economic crisis. So the cost of an economic crisis, like 2008, estimate 7 trillion, 10 trillion. If you allocate 10%, 5%, 3% of that potential cost to building such a system, think of how many great people will come to work.
Yeah, it seems, especially now more than ever, that it's a shame and just really a tragedy that we still waste human resources and all kinds of resources when we have the tools to build, like you said, a digital library, not just one that's sitting somewhere, but that could be the pocket and fingertips of every person for free. But the fact that we have it, that we're this close to it, but still don't have it because of some, you know, petty systems or issues is really tragic.
Coming back to the optimistic frame that you mentioned, Richard, I think it also makes sense, as you said, to talk about solutions. And indeed, things are moving fast. We've covered a separate episode on central bank digital currency. So central banks are also looking into it. And probably this year, maybe, or most probably you have better information than us on this, there will be a Swiss digital exchange opening up. Do you think that the possibility to trade something digitally, legally binding on a Swiss transaction infrastructure will be a game changer? Do you think this is something that will really make people and more so institutions rethink about how they exchange asset ownership?
So first of all, in its own sense, you know, if just that happens, nothing will change at all. So, but if, first of all, that token can be exchanged, not just among banks, but actually, like the internet is not just an internet, but an intermarket for everyone to use. That's point one. And second, if Alice and Bob can transfer it amongst each other. That is, if you have a Linton Sprüngli action, which I don't know how much it costs, 80,000, 100,000 Swiss francs, if I can buy it in, small increments cheaper than one Sprüngli kind of truth and give it to you, then things start to change. And I can pledge my digital coin there, then it will become a real difference. So it's as soon as it's integrated, then it has a big difference. But also we have to remember that finance will only be finance and become everyday when it has a Tinder-like user interface.
Yeah.
I mean, if it still looks like finance, something is wrong. It has to have sensors, like the first Apple iPhone, which was in itself a piece of art.
Do you think that in the future, when we look at the financial markets of the future, and you say that finance has to become more appealing to people, do you think there will be a way to make these complex concepts, and let's say maybe things will be simplified, but probably not. Things maybe become even more complicated. How do you make something like explain to people that not every expense they make is of the same quality? One expense might put money in their pocket, another expense is just waste the budget for whatever reason. Do you think in a crypto world there will be the possibility to raise people's interest on finance, to make them have a bigger share of the idea of finance, or does finance have to adapt to become more people's finance, so to speak?
First of all, it's like in medicine. I mean, when you go to your doctor, think if the doctor only thinks of his own purse. When you go to the doctor, one of the first things which you assume, he thinks of you as a patient, independent of how much money he makes. And that should be the benchmark for finance. So, absolute kind of responsibility towards the customer. You don't do it like recently I had to kind of renew my, I don't want to bitch about something, but, there are kind of certain services which you can subscribe to and you pay off for a certain object over 2 years. And then after that, you don't have to pay anymore because it's already paid off. But these services rely on me as a consumer, remembering after 2 years to give them a call to please change the fee. So the responsibility is of the finance company or the financial institution to think in the best interest of the user and take the decision for him.
So is this part of Lykke's mission, or do you see this do you see cryptocurrencies or blockchains being able to bring this sort of customer-centric or customer-focused approach to finance that you see missing?
So first of all, to my shame for the industry, I think it's not achieving their goal. There are few players who try to do it. And actually, so far, the most successful ones are those who charge big fees and, kind of can invest a lot of advertising and therefore get it going. So now it's challenging to do it the fair way. I think it's rewarding, but challenging to get it right. Because, it's all about optimizing different timescales and the environment is growing. So it's, and you can fool yourself by saying, I'm always trying to do the right thing for the customer, but sometimes it's the right thing to first earn more, to get good people, and then lower fees. So it's just very challenging to work in the best interest of your customer. And this is, goes again back to my initial constraint that I don't like these kind of interviews, because then I'm judged according to my own or things which I'm trying to aspire, and see in reality it's so much more difficult. But still, if we talk from a strategic point of view, this is what we aspire to. But then we have to go to the lowest level and try to execute.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't think there's. I think it's good to always remind yourself of. I mean, nobody's born perfect, but I think it's in constantly reminding the benchmarks that we set ourselves and trying to. It's more of a continuous fight to achieving that level than living out a perfect life.
Yes, but I think very important is we shouldn't talk about our own aspiration. We should just execute. So actually just live it. We should, just work, just do it.
Yeah, there's a Stoic quote, I think, I'm not sure from who it is, but he said, I think it was Marcus Aurelius. He says, don't discuss what a good man should be, just be a good man.
Exactly. So in that spirit, don't ask. So I should have said no to the interview.
Now, you mentioned the challenges again, and we don't want to go too deep into the challenges of it. I mean, obviously, in fintech space, you're dealing with lots of regulations. You need a lot of fixed costs. As you said, you need to achieve a certain user base in order to even break even. You need to raise prices in order to have something on the side to increase your workforce in order to then be able to lower prices again and have a market position where you can do that. But as you mentioned, there's also other areas where blockchain and crypto becomes very important and interesting, as you mentioned in your introductory examples. What other areas of life, apart from finance, do you see innovated by blockchain? What can we expect? I mean, maybe not expect too much, but if we could dream, where do you see which are the sectors of life where blockchain will prevail and make our life better?
I mean, that sounds so terrible. I mean, there will not be a sector which will not be affected, like the internet. And I would venture that the revolution is far more profound than the internet. So it's a deeply profound change. And I'm really dreaming of a society which really looks like nature. I mean, nature is, if you go into the forest or jungle, I mean, it's incredible the different animals which interact and plants which interact in this intensity. And the same thing is with society. I mean, we'll move away from a world which just there's the United States and then there's Europe and Russia. It will be a commingling of interwoven kind of value systems. And so like you'll have your own token, you'll pay with your own token, you'll receive it. So you live in your world with your value system and your colleague has his own token and your company has another token. So we'll be in a completely relativistic world.
This actually remembers me that of an initiative that I heard about and found really interesting, where they talk about replacing the concept of a nation state. And you already said like differences between US, China, different parts of the world, that a nation state is not really bound to its physical territory, that you could build nation state based on people's values, based on their, let's say their political direction, or based on them being able to secure their assets, having a common code of law, a common system of, let's say, insurance and tax collection in between each other. Do you think that these kind of things, like also talking about mobility, we're talking about automatic transactions, everyone has their own tokens, micropayments. Do you think that people will accept those radical changes, or will they, based on just how humans behave, sort of stick to the old system where they have these traditional hierarchies, these traditional pyramid systems, and will they be able to do so for long? Because at the end of the day, we do believe technology will take over at some point. But do you think that people's minds remains a concern and they need some time to adopt all of this?
So at two levels. First of all, I think very important to understand, for example, if I like it or not, Apple is not my favorite company. But when Apple says, please accept, it doesn't even say please, accept new user conditions, I am a citizen of Apple. And the user conditions is the legal framework, the legal system of Apple, if I like it or not. So these a Google is a political state. It today hides behind it shareholder value, but in actual fact, I, as a user of Google services, I'm a citizen of Google. So they should be made accountable to also fulfill our interests. And when they do a survey, they should please publish it. And if in the survey everyone says, please also start to offer school books, then they have a mandate to start to publish school books free of charge. So that's point one. The second thing is the following. Did we ever have a vote on smartphones?
Yeah.
I mean, like today at dinner, my wife said, I'm really bad at these, kind of when I use these different apps, but she's using it. Mm-hmm. So the same thing is with modern technology and these new services. If they add a lot of value, people will start to use it, no doubt. Like smartphones today, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's 50% of the world population has a smartphone.
Yeah.
So this will just come. It's just a matter of added quality and service. And with the kind of political and economic upheaval, which is most likely to come, that will actually propel the change.
Yeah, I think that the vision of not restricting ourselves to traditional country borders, but to think of ourselves as kind of world citizens that have preferences and interests or kind of memberships in different groups would definitely go a long way to bind us closer, and maybe even give us some of those technologies that you hinted at, maybe an Alexandrian library that is really free, all textbooks, any access to knowledge is completely free to anyone, irrespective of what phone they use.
Yes, and I mean, just we have to understand, environment is a global problem. It doesn't end at the borders of a country. And as long as we drive environmental initiatives from territorial countries, it will remain adversarial. Because it's easy for me to tell over there, please do something. I'll always bias the thing. But if I'm active on a global scale, there is no doubt.
Yeah, I think the idea, especially with people criticizing, certain countries that they're not taking care of their rainforests, hasn't really struck a chord until I think, especially the COVID pandemic, that showed that even health is not an issue that you can tackle on a national or regional level, but it's really a global issue, right? I mean, you can have perfect conditions, but if your neighboring country has an outbreak, then you're also at the mercy of them. So it really takes more cooperation, especially such issues.
I agree.
I have one more question. You mentioned that especially and even now the kind of more buzzwords, Bitcoin, Ethereum, they have really been subject to a lot of change over the last I'd say 4 or 5 years, like somewhere end of 2016, beginning of 2017, when Bitcoin had its major rally and then dropped. It's been a really rough kind of sailing through this sea where the public opinion on these cryptocurrencies has changed a lot. How have you perceived that, and like, could you give us a bit more insight how it was to navigate a company in such waters? Because I think no other area, no other technology has had this many changes in opinions, from companies saying that in 2017 this will change the world, and then after the crash happened saying it was all a hoax, and now it's rising again, and JP Morgan says Bitcoin will go to 150,000, and now people are again scared of it. What's your kind of view on it as an insider who's actively navigating these waters?
So first of all, I have to clearly state I did not assess the situation the right way. So I would have argued that regulation will come in far more ferocious earlier. Mm-hmm. I argued that regulators would also welcome the innovation to address the shortcoming of the economic system. That part of the debate has completely been lost. So today, I don't see people just, kind of listing the shortcomings of the financial system and then say, these are the list of issues. Mm-hmm. How can we solve them? And then I don't see them making this second list of saying how we could solve them. Mm-hmm. We only have the traditional ways we know it will not solve it, but they are still put forward. Yes. So I would welcome that one tries to think how this new technology could address that. But that hasn't happened yet. So at this stage, I think two things are very important to watch. Point one, just by design of how cryptos are set up, if they receive more interest, that will drive up the price because we go to new high levels. At new high levels, there's no one who has already sweat through a drawdown. So there's no one to sell who sells his holdings. So it will just continue to rise. And the more it rises, the more it just goes up and the reference point increases. So that's on one level. But on the negative side, we know that Bitcoin is a prototype. Exactly. It's a prototype of a technology. Mm-hmm. So in the background, new technology is being developed. At the same time, the true value of the technology is that you can apply it to the traditional financial system. So, as opposed to trading Bitcoin, for example, we could trade the Mona Lisa Leonardo da Vinci token. Yeah. There is only one Leonardo da Vinci kind of Mona Lisa painting, just one. Yeah. And we could, microscopic tokens, share that amongst each other. Exactly. So, but then you discover, there is another Mona Lisa. Actually, Leonardo da Vinci made several paintings, even though he didn't know. So it was only, so we could do. And suddenly we realize we could have a very different financial system. Mm-hmm. But again, that will only take off when people can use it and try it out every day.
But now you mentioned one thing that I think is very important, the awareness of the shortcomings of the current financial system. But at least in Switzerland, the blockchain startup scene is filled with younger people. And it would make sense to say that they don't have a full grasp of the shortcomings of the financial system. But wouldn't you, Richard, be perfectly posed to also kind of pitch the shortcomings of the financial market, given your experience in both traditional finance as well as technologies that can be used that would upgrade the traditional financial system?
So now I'm saying something terrible. When I tell you what I believe of the financial system, everyone thinks I exaggerate. So when I come and say, look, what I think is wrong, first, people think I exaggerate. And secondly, because they don't have the hands-on experience, they cannot judge.
Exactly.
So for me, beyond doubt, it's so broken, it's hopeless. But like in 2001, we built the Oanda trading platform where we paid second by second interest. And for me, this was a political statement. I wanted to show that we can move away from daily interest rate to second by second. Mm-hmm. It took 7 years before the first, from one of the big, FX banks, a senior man said, "Oh yes, there are really two ways to compute interest." And I mean, if you think back at when the Swiss franc, when the peg broke, mm-hmm. in one day, a 25% price move, and think of how much money was lost. But think if at that time it would have been possible to pay intraday interest, the price move might still have happened, but might only have been 7% or 8%. but not 25.
Yeah.
So I think, look, it's just not, when hell breaks loose, people say, oh, we didn't know, sorry, oh, no, it was impossible to know. And so in my view, I should just get on with work. Try to build awesome products and try to, not talk too much, not promise too much, just get to work.
Yeah, I think that approach of, don't talk about changing the world, just go out there and do it. But Richard, thanks a lot for your time. And we really hope that people see the value. And I think we touched on a lot of important points, especially being, as you had mentioned, that the finance system is really the nervous system of our society. We really wish you all the best with Lykke. We hope that we can bring, or that you can bring happiness to all the people who accept and beyond.
So thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
All the best. Have a nice evening.
Goodbye.
Thanks so much, Richard.
Goodbye.
Have a good evening. Thanks.